So I want to do a quick reading on a quick audit of Taro Tsujimoto. So I got this book from the library, Taro Lives, The Confessions of the Sabres Hoaxter. So this is a book by Paul Wieland. He is notoriously known as the guy who invented Taro Tsujimoto. And who's Taro Tsujimoto, you may ask? Taro Tsujimoto is a fake, or was a fake draft pick by the Sabres. So in 1974, the Buffalo Sabres, their scouts and Paul Wieland was really upset with the draft process. At that time, it was all done by telephone, so it was long. So they did a prank and they drafted the first Japanese player in NHL history by the name of Taro Tsujimoto. And it wasn't until later that they found out that, Taro Tsujimoto doesn't exist. So I've got his book from the library, Taro Lives. So I want to do a little bit of a reading of his take of how Taro Tsujimoto was created. So I'm going to be reading right from his book. So he says, "What about Taro Tsujimoto, the man who never was, who started me on my sports hoax journey?" So he's read so many faulty versions of the hoax over the year that made me laugh. And they're mostly wrong. I don't know. There were only 4 of us in the room when Taro was born. Punch Imlock, Sabres coach Floyd Smith, scouting director John Anderson, and myself. Punch and John are dead. Smith and I are very old. Let's get it from my mouth and keyboard. The jackass who brought Taro to life. So he goes on in this book and basically tells the story of how Taro Tsujimoto was created. So at this point in time, the NHL and the WHA, so the World Hockey Association, the World Hockey Association was like a competitor to the NHL. So the 1974 draft was like done in secret because they didn't want the WHI knowing who the NHL drafted. So the draft went like as long as possible. So let's see. So at this point in the second day of the draft, the Sabres brass were all kind of pissed off because it was just very monotonous. So the commissioner would go make a call and then repeat, every draft pick to the 13 times in the call. So he says, "What the hell can we do to piss off Campbell?" said Imloch. John said, "We should draft somebody nobody knows about. That will get all the other GMs. They'll be scrambling to find the player on their draft eligible list." That's when I piped in. "We should draft someone who doesn't even exist. Just make up a name from someplace that no one would expect. Like Japan, for example," I said. Now, at the time, there was hockey being played in Japan, and still is, but it wasn't of a level where players were known outside their hometowns on the northern island of Hokkaido, where there's snow and ice in the winter. "Japanese," Imlock said? "What the hell? Why not?" I quickly remembered a Japanese name from my college days. Every weekend, driving back and forth to my college campus, I'd pass an Oriental store called Tsujimoto Gardening Gifts. Eureka! I had a last name for the player. John Anderson, Danish by birth, thus nowhere near Japan, said his first name should be Taro. John said that was a common Japanese name. If he was a player, we have to flesh out a hockey identity. And I jumped in again. How about he's a center, say 5'10", 175 pounds. A call to the Tsujimoto store reached the Mr. Tsujimoto, and he confirmed katana is a sword or saber, plus Taro is a common Japanese name. I was ready to flesh out Taro for Imlock's draft pick when the time came. In a few minutes, the NHL connected's phone rang and league boss Campbell was on the line. "George Imlock here," said Punch. Then we sat patiently while Campbell listed the 13 picks since our last turn. Campbell was as boring as any lawyer could be during the reading of a will. Punch nervously fingered the papers before, and when Campbell said, "Your selection, Buffalo?" Punch replied, "The Sabres draft from the Tokyo Katanas, Taro Tsujimoto, center." Campbell asked for a spelling, which Punch patiently gave him. We knew Campbell would have to spell the full name 13 times more, one for each NHL general manager on the phone, and we laughed aloud just thinking about it. I came up with some stats from Taro for the news release I'd be issuing later that day. Taro Tsujimoto, Tokyo Katana, center, 5'10", 175 pounds, shoots left, had 15 goals and 10 assists. So they essentially made up this fake player and then just kind of ran with it. And let's see if I can pull up the an image from this book. So be patient with me. So even fans he became a folk hero. So this is the Phantom Sign Makers. They hung this. They would hang signs up from the auditorium from kind of the area. So this one says, Taro figures Punch was tired of being hustled to death. So the Phantom sign makers were a group of guys that would be up here, and they made signs for every game. And Taro says, they'd had lots of punny words that would say Taro says something. Taro says the economy is not real. Taro says money printer go burr. Really any sort of punny thing they would say. So and also when games would get out of hand, the Phantom sign makers would lead a chant in the auditorium of just "We want Taro." So kind of a local a folk hero. So this is a bumper sticker. It says Taro says, and the Taro bumper sticker says in Japanese, "Think Stanley Cup." So that's kind of the quick overview of Taro. He's a local legend, and that's kind of the story from the source himself, Paul Wieland.